All right, mathletes, here we go. We're going to do some graphing of lines from equations. So, graphing lines, when we're given it in gradient intercept form, remember gradient intercept form is y equals mx plus c. We also will see this as mx plus b in some text. Okay. Notice the y-intercept is our c or b value, and we can always plot that point. We know that that's our y-intercept because if we plug in 0 for an equation of the form y equals mx plus b, if we let x be equal to 0, all right, we get y equals m times 0 plus b. So then our y must be equal to b. Or if it's the other form, we have c here. Okay, so we're always going to graph that first point. It's going to be on our y-axis. Second, what we want to do is we want to use our x and y steps from the gradient. So remember, sometimes if our gradient is m, we want to do m over 1. And when we're talking about x and y steps, we remember that gradient is rise over run. From that, I usually suggest doing one more point in the other direction. And the last step here is just join the points and extend the line in either directions. Those extensions of lines should have arrows on both sides to interpret to our reader that we understand that this line goes on forever and that the solutions to our equation of a line go on infinitely. So let's look at an example here. Okay, so y equals negative 3 over 4x plus 5. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify my y-intercept. So my y-intercept is going to be 5. So I come up here and graph my first point. Next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and make sure I graph a gradient. Okay, so as I'm graphing negative 3/4, I think of negative 3/4 is rise over run. Okay, so I'm going to graph 2 points because I know that negative 3/4 is the same thing as 3 over negative 4. So I use my y-intercept, my 5, to go ahead and graph these 2 points. So starting here, okay, my rise, I'll do this one first, so negative 3/5. So remember, with a negative gradient, I'm expecting going downhill as I look at this graph from left to right. So I'm going to go down 3, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've plotted my point. Okay, well, now I want to think of it like this. Okay, so I could go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and now negative 4 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and I plot this point. Okay, the last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and connect these lines. So let's see if I can get this close. Okay, so notice I have all my 3 dots falling on a line, and I'm going to connect them. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure I put an arrow. Let me get my ruler out of there. I'm going to put an arrow on both ends representing my entire function. So now I've graphed my line, my y-intercept, and it's negative 3/5, right? So if I have a little car, okay, and I want to think about if my gradient's correct, I'm going to take that car, and as I'm going downhill from left to right, that corresponds to a negative gradient. Okay, so let's look at this if we're asked to graph it in general form. So the first thing here is remember that general form is of the form ax plus by equals c. What we want to do first is we want to graph the y-intercept. So the y-intercept happens, remember, when x is equal to 0. So we plug that in and we'll find that value. Our second step is going to find the x-intercept, so we are letting y be 0, and we graph that point. Once we have 2 points, we can join the lines together, okay, and extend those lines in either direction. Okay, so notice our y-intercept here first, our x-intercept where our y is 0 here, okay, and we connect the lines. So let's look at an example. All right, so 4x minus 3y equals 12. So as I do this, I like to make sure I kind of do a table. So with my table, okay, I say my x value, my y value. Well, I want to know first for my y-intercept, I let x be equal to 0. So as I plug in x being equal to 0, I get 4 times 0. Again, I'm using this equation. Minus 3y is equal to 12. I want to find my y, so I'm solving that. 4 times 0 is 0. That goes away, so I'm left with negative 3y is equal to 12. Okay, so I divide this by negative 3, divide this by negative 3, and I get y is equal to negative 4. Okay, so when x is 0, my y value is negative 4, so I come down here and I can plot that point. Okay, so what I want to do next is I want to find my x-intercept. Okay, so I'm going to do that in a similar strategy. Okay, but now I let my y be equal to 0. Okay, so same equation, I get 4x minus 3 on my y. I'm going to substitute in to be 0 is equal to 12. Well, negative 3 times 0 is 0. That goes away, and I'm just left with 4x equals 12. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. I get x is equal to 3. Alright, so put that in my table of values, and I can graph that. So I go over 1, 2, 3 here, x being 3, and my y being 0. Once I have my 2 points, I can go ahead and see if I can get my ruler on those points. Okay, and I can go ahead and graph it. Okay. I extended it so I go all the way to the edges of the paper. Okay. A little off there, but get the idea. And we have our arrows to show that we know that this is going in both directions, and we have graphed our line. That concludes our notes for tonight, so make sure you highlight any questions you might have and bring them to class tomorrow.